The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Now, back to your turn on 1330 WEBY, Northwest Florida's talk radio. The phone lines are open, so call in and join the conversation at 623-1330.
How can one man bother so many people by simply telling the truth? Freedom Friday with Carl Gallops, the Oval Office of Gulf Coast Talk Radio.
All right, welcome back, America. And so we're back. Lieutenant Mike Zullo, so you and I were at CPAC and on Capitol Hill, but we ran into a gentleman by the name of Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, who you and I both think a lot of as far as his past and his military service. But we were a little disappointed in his reaction to the legal law enforcement evidence that was presented. Tell the folks what happened with that.
Well, basically, we did run into him. We ran into him one night at dinner, and we asked for a meeting, and he said he would meet with us during the CPAC convention. We tried numerous times to get in touch with him with no return call, and you and I happened to be walking down a corridor, and he was coming through. And again, he said that he would meet with us. And as fate would have it, I was walking back in an opposite direction about an hour later and ran right into him, and was fortunate enough to get about 5 minutes. We tucked into a small, almost like utility passway to another part of the building, and we had a conversation. And I explained to him who I was. I explained to him what we were doing. He was aware of what we were doing. And, I went to Colonel West in the highest regard. I mean, here's a man who's got the Bronze Star, Meritorious Service Medals, military commendations. I mean, the guy dodges bullets.
Right.
And I went there knowing that he was a Tea Party favorite. And I asked him for a very simple request. I asked him that in the event that I was blessed enough to get an individual, and I'm just going to use the term individual, to step forward and bring this issue to the forefront, would you look at my evidence and support this individual's play? And to my surprise, he looked at me and said, no. And I look back, I go, Colonel, I'm sitting on a felony. And he said to me that he would rather spend the political capital going after Benghazi because Mr. Obama is the commander-in-chief.
Uh-huh.
And I looked at him right in the eye and I said, but Colonel, he is the commander-in-chief. And I, as a law enforcement officer, cannot tell you who he is.
Right.
And we had a dead stare for a moment. I said, I am not asking you to do anything. I am not asking you to pick up my mantle and march with it. I am merely asking, will you look at the evidence and help us? And he responded to me that they will label you with a tinfoil hat. And I promptly said, well, I'm not one of those people. This is the sheriff's office. We're a law enforcement agency. We've done a year and a half of investigative work, and we have the evidence. He looked back at me and he said, I may want to run again politically myself, and I don't know if I want to get labeled with this. I said, well, you really wouldn't be getting labeled anything once I bring you the evidence, and I'm not asking you to go out. I'm asking you to merely support the effort. And he turned as he was walking away and basically goes, I would really have to think about that, but I don't think so. And that was the end of the conversation. His aides shuffled him away when they, saw that he wanted to get out of there.
And folks, there's your conservative Tea Party hero, Colonel Alan West, who basically said, now I'm going to use other words, but this was his basic message. This felony 1.5-year criminal investigation with the chief law enforcement officer under Arpaio, who's the chief law enforcement officer, but the chief man, the chief investigator under Arpaio, standing in front of you saying, I don't have a tinfoil hat. I'm a cop. We've done a 1.5-year investigation. We've got the evidence. We've got the felony. We've got the goods. We've got people signed off on it that are certified to testify in federal court. I'm not a nut. I'm a cop, sir. Look at me. I'm a cop. Okay? We have got a felony committed in the White House. We've got a federal crime committed in the White House. And Colonel Alan West basically said, that's not politically expedient for me. I might want to run for office later. So, and he did not say this, but I'm going to put these words in his mouth. So I'm pretty much willing to sell the country down the road right now so I can win a little 2-year term as a congressman later. That's pretty much what he said, folks. And we wonder what's wrong with America. That's a colonel who Mike and I have great respect for, or at least, we did. And pray for us. And now we've got some men that are standing up and standing with us. But when you run into men like that you thought were one of your heroes, and as you just heard Lieutenant Zullo say, he didn't ask Colonel West to stick out his chest and take up our mantle and do anything other than just, if somebody else comes forward with it, because we've got a couple of people who are claiming they will, would you kind of stand beside them and stand behind them on this issue? Would you kind of bolster them up? Would you just say, hey, let's support this law enforcement investigation? And Colonel West said, no, I will not. Lieutenant Zullo, take it from there.
Well, Carl, I think it really drove home the point for me. And please let me say this. I know people are frustrated. I don't want them pursuing Colonel North and Holly North. I'm thinking about
Colonel
West and
don't do that.
And doing those kinds of things. I know everybody's frustrated, and look, there's always a chance that he does give it some thought.
Right. He might come around.
Am I counting on that?
Yeah.
No, but it could happen.
Right.
But here's what it really came down to for me. The birther Monica, the media, has put the fear of ridicule deep into the heart of our elected or even formerly elected officials.
Yeah.
They don't want to get labeled
as
being a wingnut.
Right.
And the reality is that the people that have been chasing this far longer than I have are going to be proven correct.
Correct. That's right.
We are now at a crossroad in this country where we are now giving away one of our foundational principles of the rule of law. When you can turn your cheek and look the other way when someone is violating a law out of the highest office in the land, all is lost.
Yeah.
And if you go back in history, Richard Nixon was taken out of office for the lying cover-up.
Right.
And this is going to be a cover-up.
Yeah. And the magnitude of this is 100 times greater than the Watergate cover-up, because it goes directly to who is the commander-in-chief, national security, and the destruction of our Constitution.
And Carl, there's other commentators out there like Glenn Beck that goes out saying he's never said the document isn't a forgery. He's saying that this was some kind of ruse done by the president just to tick off birthers. I've never heard such twisted logic like that.
It's foolish.
Do you want me to really believe the commander-in-chief of the greatest nation on earth has nothing better to do than to play a game with us?
And forge documents?
If he did that, he broke federal and state laws doing it by offering up a phony birth certificate.
Yep.
You can't do that. If you and I did that, we forged a document and received some kind of gain for it, some advantage for us, we would be arrested and prosecuted.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's what we're fighting. That's what we're fighting here.
Yeah, and that's a perfect explanation of it. So this is not a birther issue. Now we're dealing with a legal, law enforcement, felony, federal, forgery, fabrication, fraud issue. All the F words there, but those are good F words. But that's what we're dealing with. Now, listen, we're quickly running out of time. So 2 questions I want you to answer for our audience now. And folks, don't forget, next week, an hour and a half of Lieutenant Mike Zullo, and we're going to open up the phone lines. It'll be you and Lieutenant Zullo for an hour and a half next Friday. So you tune in. 2 questions I want you to answer. Number 1, kind of what's next? Where are we headed with this? And number 2, I know that you do everything, the Cold Case Posse does everything by donations, because you're not using taxpayer dollars for this, and which infuriates the left. They'd love to be able to say you're using taxpayer dollars for this, but you're not. So how can people donate? How can people give? And what's next? Why should people give? Why should people give? What is anything going to happen? What do you think?
Well, let me start off by letting your listeners understand that Sheriff Arpaio and I had a very long discussion a couple months back, and unfortunately, the sheriff tripped over some uneven sidewalk in Phoenix and actually broke his shoulder.
Yeah.
So he's out of the game here for a little bit, but he should be back up and running in a week or so. But he has given me the authority to do whatever I need to do to advance the issue, and he has also pledged his full weight and support behind it. Without going into too much detail, I can tell you what we're planning to do is make various appointments and presentations to very important people throughout the nation. I mean, if you just look at the map, there's about 25 red states.
Yeah.
There are people that we want to go see, people we are trying to get meetings with, trying to get the truth out there. You have to understand something else. No one has seen our book of evidence.
That's right. No one knows what you and I know. And what
They don't know.
Yeah.
They don't know. If they did see it, they would have a responsibility to act on it.
Yeah.
So we're going to bring it.
Yep.
And we're going to do whatever we can. So the sheriff has given me the authorization to do that. The problem, as you said, is we don't receive taxpayer funding. The sheriff's office cannot pay for any of this. That was the genius behind Sheriff Arpaio, you doing this way. Because if you were paying taxpayer money on this, they'd be looking to lynch him from the nearest street post.
Yeah, yeah. You got 30 seconds, Mike.
What we would need to do is we need to solicit for donations, $10, $15, one-time donation. If every listener on your radio show gave us 10 or 15 bucks,
yeah,
that would give us enough money, more than enough money, to, I believe, really start to move mountains in this.
I agree. Yeah, I agree, Mike. And thank you. Listen, next week we'll have an hour and a half. That's Lieutenant Mike Zullo. You get ready to call in next week. Go to carlgallops.com and /Obama. carlgallops.com /Obama. It will redirect you immediately to the Maricopa County Cold Case Posse website where you can click the the donate button and give. Okay? Lieutenant Mike Zullo, next week, an hour and a half. Tell people, even people that think this is a bunch of junk, tell them, call them. Tell them to call up and talk to Lieutenant Mike. In the meantime, you have been listening to Freedom Friday with Carl Gallops. Mallory Bardwell, your world-famous producer. God bless you. God bless America.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.